Hello.
Hello, hello,
Hello.
Hello, gentlemen.
hello.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Norm.
Hello.
Okay, volume 15. Finally arrived. Oh, did you see Drew and Karina Parker? Susie, you see Drew and Karina Parker
Yeah, I saw his
sponsored it.
Beautiful.
grandson was at the bus stop 10 minutes before the stop.
I'm sure Michael, I mean, Michael knows him.
The friends. The French.
We talk to him twice a week. He's always talking to us, either he's on the way to school or just getting out,
Okay,
right there.
page 23. We're going to learn about the bracha of Alamichya. Of bracha mein shalish. In volume 14, we learn about the halachas of Hamotzi, the bracha recited before eating bread. We learn about brachas hamazon and bracha rishona, boy priya eitz, boy priya dama. And in this first year, volume 15, we will study the halachas of bracha achrona. Chazal divided the bracha achrona on foods other than bread into two categories. Bracha me'ein shalosh ala michya and borei nefashos. The bracha me'ein shalosh, the bracha that is similar to three. And what three are we talking about? We're talking about birchas hamazon, hazaras hakol, ala aretz v'ala mazon, and bonei Yerushalayim, because there are only three brachos. Later on in Yavna, they established the bracha of Atovu Meiti. When the Romans gave permission to bury the dead people of Beitar, which was the 135 CE revolt of Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kokhba. So there was a huge loss of life. They say over 1 million people. And for a couple of years, the Romans didn't allow them to be buried. And then at a certain point, they were given permission to bury them. And they made the bracha of Hatovu Meitiv at that time. So the bracha me'ein shalosh is because the bracha that is like the three-headed bracha, which is birchas hamazon. So the bracha me'ein shalosh is recited on grain products. You eat a cracker, you eat a cookie, right? We went through, what would trigger a benching of a full birchas hamazon, what would not? So any food that you eat that is grain-based, but that does not rise to the level of needing birchas hamazon, you would recite ala michya, or wine or grape juice would require an ala michya, or fruits of the Shivas Haminim, right? Figs, dates, pomegranates, or the other 7 species, chita, saora, gefen, te'ena v'rimon, zeit shemen udvash, olives. So while bar nefashos is recited after eating foods, over which one recites a bracha rishona of ha'etz, or ha'adama, or shahakol. That's the broad guidance. Now, the structure of bracha mein shalosh, as we will learn, the bracha mein shalosh is an abridged version of the first three brachas of Birchas Hamazon, which is the reason for the name Bracha Mein Shalish. Why don't you sit next to me so you can read? We should have ordered a second. The structure of all three versions pertaining to grain products, wine, and Shivas Aminim is nearly identical, except for the beginning and the end of the bracha. Following the general introduction of Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, the bracha for grain products begins with the words Ala Michya Ve'ala Kakal, and is colloquially known as Ala Michya. The bracha on wine or grape juice begins with the words of Ala Gefen Va'Priya Gefen, and is colloquially known as Ala Gefen. The bracha recited on Shivas Aminim begins with the words Ala Eitz Va'Priya Eitz, right, for the tree and the fruit of the tree, and is known as Ala Eitz. So you have Ala Michya, Ala Gefen, and Ala Eitz. Now, the first source that discusses the Bracha Mein Shalish is the Mishnah in Gemara and Brachos, which presents a dispute between Tanoim as to whether one recites the actual Birchas Hamazon on these foods or one bracha with three components. The Gemara explains the source for the two sides, and then cites a number of rulings from the Amoraim on the matter, in accordance with the opinion that one indeed recites the bracha Mein Shalish on the Shiva Sami, on the 7 species. Says the Mishnah in Brachos Mem Dalet. Ochal anovim te'enim v'rimonu. Person ate grapes, figs, pomegranate. Mevarcha chareim shalish brachos. Divrei Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel says you would bench. You'd say the full Birchas Hamazon. Chachamim oimrim bracha achas me'ein shalish. You may only make one bracha, which is like an abridged version of the Birchas Hamazon. Gemara. My time at Rabban Gamliel. Why? What's the reason Rabban Gamliel, who requires a Birchas Hamazon for eating these fruits? Dichsiv, Eretz Chita Sa'ora, Uksiv Eretz Asher Lo B'Miskenut Tochal Balechem, a land where you will eat bread, a lot of bread, without scarcity. Uksiv, and then it says you shall bench. So, since all of these things, Eretz Chita Sa'ora, including Gefen Utein of Rimon, concludes with this pasuk, the Barachta, which is the Birchas Hamazon, has to be said. I v'Rabanan, Eretz Hifsikain. Because Eretz Chita Sa'ora, Eretz Asher Lo B'Miskenut, is a new Eretz. So it breaks the connection with the previous pasuk. What does Rabban Gamliel say to that? Rabban Gamliel nami Eretz Hifsikain. Ahu meboile l'meute hakosem esachita. He needs that. He needs the pasuk to tell me that if somebody took raw wheat and chewed it, you do not have to bench from it because it doesn't have the status of bread. Amar Rav Yaakov Ridi Amar Rav Chanina. Kol shu mechameshes haminim. Anything from the 5 categories of grain. We're talking about wheat, barley, rye, spelt, and oats. As long as you haven't made bread from these things, if you've made other grain products, like cream of wheat, cracker, which doesn't fulfill the criteria of bread, which we've been through. So betchilim avarach alav bar minim izonos, and then ulvasov bracha achas me'ein shalish. V'ala Michya. Rav Bar Meri, Rav Yeshua ben Levi. Kol shu meshiva saminin. So this is now an additional halacha. Any of the 7 species that are mentioned in that pasuk, which includes figs, grapes, dates, pomegranate, olives. All of these are fruit of the tree. So we're seeing that this din of alamichya is a very ancient din. This din is in the Mishnah and in the Gemara. Now, the Gemara has another discussion regarding the text of the bracha mein sholish when reciting it on grain products and on fruit products. What is the nusach of the bracha that's supposed to represent the 3 blessings like Birchas Amos? So, aperea eitz, if you're eating fruits of a tree, like figs or dates or olives, ala eitz val prea eitz, val tnuvata sadeh, val eretz chemdat, so on the produce of the field, val eretz chemdat tova, on the beautiful land, or chava, the wide land, shinchalta lavotenu, that you gave to our ancestors as an inheritance, le'echol mepirya, to eat from its fruits, v'lizboa metuva, and to be satisfied from its goodness. Rachem Hashem Elokeinu, we ask Hashem to be merciful, Al Yisrael Amecha, on your people Israel, V'Yishalayim Yirecha, on your city Jerusalem, V'al Migdashecha V'al Mizbachecha, on your Beis HaMikdash and on your Mizbech. And you notice the comparison to Birchas Hamazon. The Ala Aretz HaTova is like the middle brach. The Rachem Hashem Elkacha is like the Rachem. And now comes the V'tivnei Yerushalayim Ir Kodshecha B'nei Yabeinu. That's Uvnei Yerushalayim. V'aleinu L'tocha, you shall raise us there. The Samchenu Ba, we should rejoice there. Ki ata tovu meitiv lakol. Look at what happens here. They throw in a remez to the 4th bracha of Hatovu Meitiv. Now, that was for fruit. We're talking about the Gemara. This is Gemara Masechta Brachos. This is Abaya saying this to Rav Mimi. So these are later Amoyroim. Remember, I told you that the bracha of Hatovu Meitiv was established in Yavna like 135 CE. Abai and Rava lived in the year 300 CE. So that makes sense that they would have added Tovu Meitiv Lakol because that was already now the standard nusach of the regular benching. Now, this was the introduction. Ala eitz val priya eitz. So the Gemara goes on to say, the chameshes haminim, you would start, like if you're eating grain, you'd say ala michi vala kalkola, val tnuva saset vasadeh, v'choisein, and the way you conclude is ala aretz vala michi. Now, and then we'll see that we conclude when you eat grapes differently, and when you eat fruit, you conclude differently. So the Gemara asks, Michtim b'may chotem. How do we conclude the bracha? So Kiyos Radimi Omar, Rav Chosim b'Rosh Chodesh, Baruch Mekadesh Yisrael v'Rosh Chadosh. Rav in Bovel would conclude on Rosh Chodesh, he would throw in that Mekadesh Yisrael Rosh Chadosh. Hacha Mai. What about here in Bavel? Rav Dimi lived in Bavel. Rav originally came from Eretz Yisrael because he was the Talmud of Rebbe. Rebbe lived in Tveria. Rebbe is buried in Tveria. Rebbe died about 180 CE, 180, 200. So Rav, who's like the first generation of the Amoiras in Bavel, I mean, he founded Gemara learning, basically, Rav Shmuel, that generation of Amoraim. So Abai and Rav are 3 to 4 generations after Rav. Rav Chizda Omar, ala aretz val peroseh, that when you conclude the bracha after eating fruit, you wouldn't conclude with ala mechiv ala kalkala, which was the grain. You would conclude specifically for the fruit. Rav Yochanan Omar ala aretz vala peros. Omar Rav Amram velo pligi, halon v'halahu. Rav Chizda lived in Bavel, so he would conclude al aretz val peros. Rav Yochanan lived in Eretz Yisrael, he concluded al aretz val peros. There's no machlok, it's just alon. It's one nusach is for Eretz Yisrael, the other nusach is for us. Maskid Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Inu achli v'anu mevarchim. I understand. They in Eretz Yisrael eat, and we make a bracha. Ela epa. Rav Chizda Amar. Reverse it. Rav Chizda says ala aretz vala peros, and it's Rav Yochanan ala aretz val peros. Okay. As mentioned previously, the Gemara indicates that the 3 elements of the Torah obligation for Birchas Hamazon are recited in abridged form in the Bracha Mein Sholosh: food, the land of Israel, and Jerusalem. The second half of the Gemara focused on an additional point with respect to the conclusion of the Bracha of Ala Eitz. According to the conclusion of the Gemara, Rav Chizda holds that one concludes with Ala Aretz Vala Peros. And Rav Yochanan holds that one includes with Ala Aretz Val Peroseh. Peroseh means on the land's fruits. Rav Chizda is referring to fruits grown in the Golah, while Rav Yochanan refers to fruits grown in Eretz Yisrael. The Shulchan Aruch rules with this conclusion. Ivracha achas ben shalosh shall peris to chutz la'aretz. If you eat fruit that is grown in chutz la'aretz, choisim al aretz vala peros. With the Eretz Yisrael, choisim al aretz val peroseh. In Eretz Yisrael, if you make a bracha on fruits from Eretz Yisrael, it's al aretz val peroseh. Now, today, Jaffa oranges are grown in Eretz Yisrael and are sold in the Golah, right? So it is common for Israeli fruits to be marketed in the Golah. What is the halach in such a case with respect to the text of the bracha? The Rashba discusses this. The Rashba, I'm going to remind everybody, lived in Barcelona about 1350. So you're talking about 800 years ago. But in the times of the Rashba, I guess fruits from Eretz Yisrael were making it to Europe. If the Rashba is discussing it, must be that there was a Metzias like that. And writes that one still says, just as one does in Eretz Yisrael. Means, if you eat a fruit that was grown in Eretz Yisrael, you eat it in Los Angeles, you make the bracha of ala aretz val peroseh. You know that the fruit is grown in Israel. The Rashba says it's logical that if you are in chutz la'aretz, but if you eat fruit that comes from Eretz Yisrael, mavarch al haaretz v'al peroseh. You use the nusach that you would use if you were in Eretz Yisrael eating Israeli fruits. That when Rav Chisda, when the Gemara initially thought that Rav Chisda was the one who said al haaretz for peroseh, it was a problem. That concept that the people in Eretz Yisrael are eating Israeli fruits and we're reciting a bracha for their fruits. So whenever we eat them, wherever we are, if they're Israeli fruits, we will make ala peres val peroseh. So according to the Rashba, the Gemara only expressed difficulty with reciting al haaretz for peroseh when residents of Babylonia used that terminology for locally grown fruit. However, when eating fruit grown in Eretz Yisrael, it seems that one indeed would use the expression of al haaretz for peroseh, and the Shulchan Aruch rules that way. V'im b'chutz la'aretz oichel meperes haaretz, choisem gam kein al haaretz v'al peroseh. However, the Mishnah Berurah writes, can you get me a bigger? Okay. The Mishnah Berurah writes that one should only conclude the bracha with al peroseh when one is sure of the origins of the fruit. When one is in doubt, you should say al haaretz v'al peros, because it's a more inclusive wording. It covers all bases. And if you don't know for sure, just say that. Says the Mishnah Berurah here, the Mishnah Berurah is making a ged there. You should follow the Shulchan Aruch when you know for sure that the fruits are from Eretz Yisrael. Maybe it's grown in Syria or it's grown in lands close to Eretz Yisrael, and you're not sure, is it considered Eretz Yisrael or not? Yoimer ala peretz. V'hu adin kishoichel b'Eretz Yisrael. Even if you're in Israel. Ve'eni yodeh mein peretz haaretz or shirubim michutz laaretz. Even in Israel, you may eat fruits that are coming from Greece or somewhere else. So then lo yivarech ala, you should only make yivarech gam ken haaretz v'al peretz. It's very small. The art scroll Sidurim just says ala haaretz v'al peros. I don't know if we looked at like Sidurim in Eretz Yisrael, I'm sure it would list the proper bracha. But the art scroll Sidurim, which have been made, yeah. Okay. Weiter. We mentioned above that the structure of Alamichya parallels that of Birchas Hamazon. The Tur explains the specific correlations in the source below. The Tur also notes that he and the Rambam disagree as to whether one mentions Hatavu Meiti, the fourth bracha of Birchas Hamazon, as that bracha was added later by the sages, not from the Torah, unlike the rest of Birchas Hamazon. Now, when the Tzurba says here from the Torah, the bracha of al haaretz v'al hamazon was established by Yoshua. There's no source in the Torah for that one. And I mean, there's Tanakh, and David HaMelech and Shlomo Melech established Rachem and Uvnei Yerushalayim. I'm not sure exactly why they say that it's not from the Torah. Let's see what the Torah says. Alamichya umein birchas hazah. Just the words alamichya v'lakalka on the food That's like saying Hazanas ha'olam kulo b'tuvo. That's like saying God provides nourishment. So we're saying Baruch Atah Hashem ala michri v'ala kalkal. So that's the doppelganger of Hazanas ha'kol. V'aleretz chem dehu mein birchas haaretz. That's the second bracha. Noide lecha and ala haaretz. Rachem mein bonu shalayim. And then he says, Ki ata Hashem tovu meitiv mein birchas tovu meitiv. Because of our Rambam, yesh ein oimrim, Ki ata Hashem tovu meitiv. Shelo tiknel mein gimel, not mein dalid, right? The Gemara in Brachos refers to achas mein shalosh. The shalosh didn't include a tovu meitiv, right? Because that only happened later. So the Rambam, in fact, says, you don't say a tovu meitiv, in ala michya. But the Tur says, if you look at all the Sidurim and the Nusach, we see Atovu Meitiv is in there, and it's still called Mein Gimel. Afal Pisha Taknu Mein Dalet, even though in practice it should have been called Mein Dalet. She'en Kornosel al Shem Gimel Shem Doraisa. They're biblically mandated. The three are biblically mandated. Again, I question the Tur. Where is he getting that? That it's biblically mandated. The Nusach, the standard Nusach of Ar Alamichya, clearly says Ki ata Hashem tovu meitiv lakol. It includes it.
I
And
think if
our
I
Nusach-
recall,
Our Nusach adds v'nodelecha ala aretz val pri hagefen. We have to see when did that get added, the v'nodelecha, because up until now, the Gemara's, the Nusach that was quoted in the Gemara follows our Nusach. And it seems like the Rambam has an opinion to get rid of that tovu meiti, but all other Nuschos follows that. But if you look at the Nusach of Alamichya, it says Ki ata Hashem tovu meiti lakol, v'nodelecha ala aretz, and then either al pri hagefen or ala peiros v'alamichya.
I
So we
think that when you said Zminat Torah, if I remember, I just learned this Gemara, the Gemara in Brachos, Mem Ches on the day says that the three first ones, there are psukim for. They're based on psukim. Although they were masakin later by David HaMelech and Shlomo, whatever, they were based on psukim. Whereas that Tova Meitiv was not based on a pasuk. It was just done because of what you said with the in Beitar, the revolution in Beitar.
Right, but we'd have to see. I'm interested in the source because Yoshua was misakin it. Oh, Yoshua may have referred to a pasuk in the Torah,
Right.
and
Based on the pasuk.
maybe David HaMelech as well.
Yeah.
Okay, that we have to probably is correct. So our custom is to include the words Ki ata Hashem tovu meitiv, as the Torah explains, and it's accepted by the Mishnah Berurah as well. Poskim also discuss whether the bracha of Alamichya should conclude Alamichya or Alamichya v'ala kalkala. So if you look at the Nusach, it says Ki ata Hashem tovu meitiv lakol v'nodelecha al aretz v'alamichya. Now the Art Scroll also says Ala Aretz v'alamichya. The bracha concludes, doesn't say Alamichya v'ala kalkala. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch writes that you should say Alamichya v'ala kalkala. That's Rav Gansfrei. Bivrocha mein shalish, shalachem inem zoynes, posech Alamichya v'ala kalkala, v'choisem v'noide lecha. So there, all of a sudden, we see the Kitzur throwing that in here. Right? We haven't seen v'noide lecha anywhere yet. Ala aretz v'alamichya, Baruch atah Hashem, ala aretz v'alamichya v'alkalkala. Ukvar nitfas hanuscha b'sidurim. This has been printed. V'tzarach kol ish Yisrael yos baki b'bracha zu bal peh. Every Jew has to learn a bal peh. I remember, I don't know, 3rd grade, 4th grade, we were made to learn it. You had to come to school and everybody had to recite it individually. This is also the view of Rav Mordechai Eliyahu. On the other hand, the Mishnah Berurah and Rav Ovadia say you should only conclude with Alamichya. Now you know why the Art Scroll says you follow, because they follow the Mishnah Berurah. Nusach HaBrocha Beretz Yisrael, excuse me, Nusach HaBrocha Borcha to Hashem, Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, Ala Michyav Ala Kalkalav Al Nuvas HaSodeh, etc. And then the conclusion, Baruch Atah Hashem Ala Arts Vala Michyav. The Chafetz Chaim explains further in the Sharat Zion that, in his opinion, most Rishonim adopted this version of the bracha. Hine Avsheb b'Magen Avram, Mesayim b'Nusach HaBracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Ala Michyav Ala Kalkala. So the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch was following the Magen Avram. The Magen Avram is usually somebody that we follow halacha, and it's surprising that the Mishnah Berurah doesn't follow the Magen Avram here. Still, and the earlier Rishonim, like the Tur and the Avudram, had Ala Michyav Ala Kalkala. Lo he'etaktiv. The Mishnah Berurah says, I didn't copy that. I follow just Ala Michyav. The Kfar Kosav Beis Yosef, Al Divrei HaTur. The Beis Yosef in his commentary on the Tur, from the Halachos Gdolos, Rambam, and the Smag, Sefer Mitzvahs Gdolos, Muchach Bahadei, Shelo Lachtam Rak B'Ala Michyav. V'cheinu Gam Ken Nuschos HaRif VeHaRosh. So the Mishnah Berurah is bringing the giants, the Rif, the Rosh, the Rambam, the Beis Yosef. So even though the Tur and Avudram said that the conclusion is Ala Michyav Ala Kalkala, we follow the majority. V'chein nimtza b'shem Rabbeinu Chananel, Huva b'shibei Ala Lekef, or Zarua, all Rishonim. V'chein Hevi b'shibei Ala Lekef b'shem Rashi, the Sefer HaPardes. V'chein Kosav HaRiyaz, Shenusach Zeh Iker. Okay, so that's a big deal. Why the Nusach is the way we have it. Is Ala Michyav biblical or rabbinic? Now, what would we all say before we start learning it? I mean, we've all been taught that the only two brachos that are midoraisa are Birchas Hamazon and Birchas HaTorah. And because it says Ve'achalta v'savata, and that refers l'chura to benching. But let's see how we're going to develop this. As we saw in Shiur 4 of the previous volume, Birchas Hamazon is clearly a Torah obligation. What though is the status of the bracha mein sholosh, which is modeled after the Birchas Hamazon? Is it to a mitzvah midoraisa, or is its obligation a lesser level? The Rambam writes that all brachos besides for Birchas Hamazon are mandated on a rabbinic level. Kol ha-brachos ha'elu, he's talking about Birchas HaNeni, I believe. In the Stapik Lo Behem, if he was in doubt whether he recited them or not, in Birch or Lo Birch, and in a Choser, you don't go back. All brachos, including Ala Michyav, is midrabanan. The Tur accepts the Rambam's ruling only with respect to bracha rishona, like hamotzi or boy pri'aetz, the bracha recited before. But concerning brachos mein sholish, the Tur argues that the obligation to recite it after eating is a biblical one. Wow. So you have the Tur who says that Ala Michyav is midoraisa. V'nira dafka rishoina, shehi midrabanan. The nafkala misvar she'asur lanis ma'alam hazeh below bracha. There is a logical reason for reciting a bracha before you eat, because it's like prohibited to benefit from the world without thanking Hashem for it. And the Rabbanan created that. But he says, if you eat a date or a pomegranate, which is one of the Sheva Aminim, the Ala Michyav bracha afterwards is midaraisa. The masmich le'akra. because it's all connected to V'achalta v'savata. All those Eretz Chita Soira Gefen Tena V'rim on that pasuk is next to the pasuk of V'achalta v'savata. The Cheinira Medivrei Halachas Gedolim. So the Tur brings an earlier codifier, the Baal Halachas Gedolos, the Bahag. The Bahag operated very early, 900, 1,000. The Smag, the Bahag, they were like in the Gaonic times, pre-Rashi. Thus, the Rambam apparently holds that Bracha Mein Sholish is rabbinic, while the Tur holds that its obligation is biblical. The Beis Yosef discusses the views of other Rishonim as to whether Bracha Mein Sholish is biblical mandated or rabbinical. He suggests that the Rajban and Rosh also imply that the obligation is biblically mandated. V'chein mashma b'reish perek Ketzos Mevarchim, says the Beis Yosef. V'chein kosav HaRashba sham. The lekadaton bracha lo lefanav lo la'achrav min Torah, that the brachas before and afterwards are not Torah law. Ela shivas aminim bilvad, the 7 species. She'ein te'unin bracha la'achreim min Torah. He still says that the bracha before eating them would be rabbinic, but the bracha after would be min Torah. And sha'ar meaning, but if you're going to eat an apple or an orange, which are not one of the 7 species, bein lifnei and bein lachreim, ein te'unin klal ela misvor. They're not biblically. The whole reason we're making brachas, either before or after, is all misvora. Ukra asmachta ba'alma. The rabbis just gave us a pasuk as an asmachta, something to lean on, but it does not give it a derisidic stance. And says the Beis Yosef, not only the Rashba, v'chein kosav gam ken harosh, the perek ahu, in the same perek v'zel l'shono, yesh listapik al birchas born of foshus rabos, im tzricha shirim la. He says it's in doubt whether born of foshus requires you to eat a minimum amount or not. And that maybe you say born of foshus no matter what. The dilma davka birchas bein sholish. It's only the alamichya that requires a shear for you to say it. The boy shear comes out, says the Beis Yosef, mashma desfirale, the bracha mein sholish doraisa. And the Shulchan Aruch rules, in accordance with the Rambam, that bracha mein sholish is only rabbinically mandated. Therefore, in cases of uncertainty, whether you recited it or not, you would not recite it again. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Reish Tes, Kol ha-brachos im nistapik im birchim lav, all brachos, if you were in doubt whether you said it or not, einam avarch lo b'tchila v'lo b'sov, you don't repeat, you don't say the bracha at the beginning or end. Chutz b'birchas hamazon b'nei shu shel Torah. If you're in doubt whether you said birchas hamazon, you have to say it. The Mishnah Berurah notes that although the Shulchan Aruch rules in accordance with the Rambam, nonetheless, it is proper to be machmir, like the Rishonim, who rule that alamich is biblically mandated. We learned in the previous volume that it remains uncertain whether women's obligation in Birchas Hamazon constitutes a biblical one or a rabbinic one. The Piskei Teshuvos therefore states that if a woman is unsure whether she recited Bracha Mein Shalois, she should not repeat it. Since, as is evident here, the status of Bracha Mein Shalois is more lenient than Birchas Hamazon. He says that the Shulchan Aruch is following the Rambam and the Sefer Mitzvahs Gedolos, who hold shesoivin the bracha mein shalosh mevarch la shivas aminim umin rabbanim. Havel be'emes yesh harbe rishonim. The Mishnah Berurah is reminding us, as we learned tonight in the Beis Yosef, that there are many powerful Rishonim, the Rashba, the Rosh, Shesovrin Shumi Deraisa. So therefore, Al Korcha Kozva Achroinim, the Misha Achal Kadei Svia Mi Peros, O Tafshil Shoshivas Amini. If a person ate and he is satiated from the 7 species, or a dish made from the 7 species, V'nistapik lo in bir chachrav, and he's unsure if he recited the Alamichra. So yoichal oid moisa min shir kazayis. You should eat another kazayis. V'varech achrav, and then make Alamichra. V'yotzi al yedezek amasafik shalom, and then it'll take care of the suffix. Ayin b'prima godin shemitzadedim. Ein lo me'oso amin, that if he doesn't have of that species, yikach mimin acher shu mishivas aminim. Let's say you ate a pomegranate. You don't have any pomegranate, so you can take a date, which is part of the 7 meaning. You go and chachal pre-aids, yikach minem izonos lechalka ba'bracha, or eat a cracker, which would require an alamichya. The Yalkut Yosef, following Rav Ovadia, though rules in accordance with the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch. Kol habrachas kulan, kol habirchas haTorah. He says, including birchas haTorah, the birchas hananim lifneim v'lachreim, brachas before and after, brachas hashvach, birchas hamitzvos, in istapik b'kulan in birchim lav. If you don't know, you're in doubt whether you made the bracha, einam avarach lo b'tchil v'lo b'sof. You don't repeat it. Chutz b'birchas hamazon, b'nei she'er shel Torah. V'lachein, im achal peros or uga, if he ate fruit or cake, when he's stopping in birchas nefashos or alamichya. For example, if you ate an apple or an orange, you would say bor nefashos. You wouldn't say an alamichya because it's not one of the sheva minim. So in any of those examples, o lo birech, he's not sure if he made the bracha or not. On his topic, imochal shir kazayis betok dechilas pras. Maybe he's in doubt whether he ate the proper shir. So im yochel echol od betok dechilas pras, if it's within 9 minutes, because that's eating a dechilas pras. So, for example, when you on the Seder night, and you made a bracha on matzah, and you have to eat a kazayis matzah or 2 kazayis matzah. So you can't just nibble on it for 2 hours. You've got to eat it within 9 minutes. It's the same thing in an Aveira. If you're going to eat chazer, and you ate a kazayis, but it took you 30 minutes to eat it, you wouldn't get malchus for that. You're not allowed to eat it because it's chatzi shir osam in a Torah. You're not allowed to eat any amount. It's prohibited, and it's prohibited midoraisa. But if 2 Eidim came in the time of Bezdin, they would not give you malchus if you ate it within longer than 9 minutes. Same thing if you're eating something a la mitzvah, for example, eating matzah. So here the same thing. If you're still within 9 minutes of when you ate this thing, because if it's longer than that, then you're not going to cover the base anyways. And so if you're not, or you don't have the fruit, he's postulating like the Shulchan Aruch, which is the way the Svardim do. The Gamliel in bracha rishona, if you were unsure whether you made the original bracha, in this topic in bircholo, you're unsure whether you made the bracha, einam avarach misafek. Muter lo lechatchil lechol bli bracha. You can eat it. If you can hear somebody else make the bracha, and you say, "Oh, man, it's better." So, although the Shulchan Aruch rules that bracha mein shalosh is only of rabbinic origin, he nonetheless rules that some elements should parallel the rules of birchas hamazon. For example, the posture in which birchas mein shalosh should be recited is comparable to birchas hamazon, specifically while seated. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Yesh Oimrim, Shekam Birchas Mein Shalosh, Tzarech La'amra Miyushev. you should recite Alamichya sitting. Similarly, Shulchan Aruch requires one to recite Alamichya over the 5 types of grain specifically, in the place where the food was consumed, just like with respect to Birchas Hamazon. Remember, we learned if you leave and you go to somewhere else, so it's the same dinim apply here. But as we saw in the previous volume, Shir 1, source 36, he cites differing opinions as to whether the Allah aids for the Shivas Aminim must also be recited where the food was consumed. The Ramah cites a third opinion that one must recite the bracha in the place of consumption only after eating bread. So Yesh Shoimrim, Shashivas Aminim Tu'unim bracha lachrebim koma. So some say you got to do it where you are, where you ate it. The Yesh Oimrim, that's only the dafka minei doga, grain. And the Ramah says Yesh Oimrim dafka pas, some say only bread. The Vilna Gaon rules that the halacha follows the second opinion, that one must recite the bracha achrona for the 5 grains in the location where they were eaten, but the bracha achrona for fruit of the Shivas Aminim may be recited in a different location. Says the Bir Agra, Yesh Oimrim, quoting a Tosfos Sham, Urisem Ein Aliyah Tshuva, that Tosfos' arguments are so strong that you can't argue. Tosfos challenges the opinion of the Rashbam with a series of strong questions. So, if you're eating grain, the bracha achrona should be recited where you are, but if you're eating fruit, it can be recited somewhere else. We also saw in the previous volume that the Mishnah Berurah cites the opinion of the Gra, but he also writes that according to most Achronim, one should treat all Shivas Aminim as foods that do require a bracha achrona in their original location. So even fruit, says the Mishnah Berurah. Even with the 7 fruits. Regarding if you moved, you don't have to recite a new bracha. You don't have to recite a bracha on the sheva, meaning like bread, if one changes place, based on the second ruling of the Ramah, where he said it's only bread and not other things. But the middle opinion, like the Gra says, is more choshev. After the fact, if one left a location in which one ate without reciting the bracha bein sholosh for fruits or wine, it would seem that one may rely on the lenient opinions and not return to one's original location. The Vizos HaBracha rules that if one wishes to continue eating in such a case, one should not recite a new bracha. Now, the rules of the length of time after one has finished eating, that one may recite a bracha achrona, are similar to Birchas Hamazon. We learned in the previous volume that one may recite Birchas Hamazon up until 72 minutes, and perhaps as long as one is still satiated. According to Avodram, the same rules apply to Alamichya. Because of Balamor, a Rishon, im shasu achal peros v'shachal bracha achroina, chayzu mevar kol zman she'enu tzameh. As long as he's still not thirsty or satiated, and that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. Ad emes sayach levarik. When can you recite the Birchas Hamazon? Achi sachel Hamazon shebemeyav. Until the food is digested. Become a shear. You're not hungry anymore. When you start getting hungry again, then you wouldn't be able to bench. Even though the food's not digested. And considered as if it can completely digest it. Here's the important part for us. If you're still not hungry or thirsty, you want to eat more of the fruits. Yivarchem ena yodeh l'sharim nisaklu. Should make another bracha if you don't know if it was digested. And vice versa, you're still allowed to make the alamichi as long as you're not hungry. Okay. We will continue with further halachas of alamichya and bar nefashos. The shiurim that are required for these brachos to be recited next week, probably finish this segment. Any comments, questions, aros?
You're gonna be in Israel.
Yeah, hang on, but 6 o'clock, I can teach 6 o'clock.
I would say, Ernie, going back to your question about the brachos being midoraisa, even though they were misaken by David and Yeshua, it's like the avos tiknu the tfilos. I mean, the avos didn't make up the words; those were done by the Anshe Knesset Agdola, but it's based on their tfilos. So while they created the obligation, the words themselves were actually misaken later.
Could be, remember, tefillah is not deraisa.
No, I understand, but it's the same idea.
But
Just
it's the same idea the way the Torah brings it.
yeah. In other words, we say that tefillas, Shachris Avram Tikkun
Avos tiknu.
Avos Tiknu, right? So it's not Avram didn't make up the words; he just created the obligation, and then the Anshe Knesset Agdola actually later created the word. Same as in benching, the brachas, the first three brachos come from the Torah, but the words were actually misaken later on.
Right, and I agree. I'd like to see the Gemara there, where if Yoshua or David and Shlomo relied on certain psukim in the Torah.
Yeah, I guess I just learned it. It's the Omid Yomi, so it's Mem Ches Omid Beis.
Where are you in brachas?
Brachos, Mem Ches Omid Beis.
Very good. Very good. Any other comments? We're missing Sai tonight and Bernie.
No, Bernie was here.
Bernie's here. I see Bernie. I'm just wondering who's missing. Sai. Okay.
Okay.
Saul is here, but we have 9.
Bernie, aren't you going away next week?